Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, A Good Listen, where I sit here and tell you about an audiobook I recently listened to in story format, and I reveal the book where today's story has come from at the end of the video. So if you're a fan of horror, mystery, or thriller novels, then you come to the right channel because that's all I do, and I'll be posting once or twice a month. So without further ado, let's get into today's story. In today's story, we find Adrienne sitting in the backseat of a taxi with her cat Wolfgang, headed to a house that she has inherited from an aunt she barely remembers. Unfortunately for Adrienne, her mother fell ill and her illness got so bad that she needed round-the-clock care. So Adrienne ended up quitting her job in order to provide her ailing mother with the round-the-clock care that she needed. While she was taking care of her mother, Adrienne ended up getting some freelance writing jobs to help pay for the bills and try to cover her mother's medical expenses. Unfortunately, her mother ended up passing away. And after her and her mother's savings was pretty much depleted, her freelance work wasn't enough to cover all the expenses that were left behind that Adrienne was now responsible for taking care of. Adrienne ended up eventually having to sell her mother's home and all of her possessions in order to cover all those last minute expenses, medical bills, regular bills, in order to kind of get herself out of debt. But that ended up leaving her with barely any money left. And so, unfortunately, Adrienne had to pack up the little possessions that she had, and she kind of had to move in. Well, not kind of, she actually did move in with a friend in order to try to get on her feet, to provide a roof over her head for her and her cat. Adrienne was more than grateful that her friend allowed her to stay in her house until she could get on her feet. The living situation between those two weren't ideal. It wasn't like they were, fighting or anything. It's just cramped spacing. And so it just so happened that Adrienne received a letter in the mail, and this letter was from her great aunt Edith, the aunt that she hardly remembered. And the letter was informing her that she had inherited a house from her great aunt Edith. And so, all in this letter, Adrienne's finding out that her great aunt Edith had passed away, in addition that she now has a home. And Adrienne doesn't have any family other than her great aunt Edith that she has a relationship with, that she can actually reach out to for assistance. So she's kind of on her own, and she doesn't have anywhere else to go. Again, the living situation with her friend is not ideal, and so she takes her great aunt Edith up on her offer, and she decides to go to the house that she has now inherited. She barely remembers this house. She doesn't know what condition this house has been left in or anything. She just knows that she now has inherited a house. But anything is better than what she has right now, which is nothing. And so now we're back into the taxi. She's on her way to her inherited home. And as she's driving through the town, she's noticing that the taxi is like going through a city, and then the city turns into like a little hick town. And as she's going through this hick town, she's noticing a group of women on the corner, and they're all talking, laughing, and then they kind of notice her taxi driving by. And as Adrienne is going by, she kind of looks at these women. She kind of sizes them up. She sees that these women are around her age, and that, there's a possibility there. She could probably make friends with these women. And as she's having this thought, looking out the window of her taxi, she sees these women looking at her, and she sees them pointing and laughing, and she kind of gets this ill feeling like they're talking about her. And it didn't help that she was going through this really small town, this town that kind of gave that feel like, everybody knows everybody, and she was definitely like the sore thumb sticking out. And so she felt like instantly like these women were like talking about her, laughing at her. She just got a really bad feeling, and it didn't feel good. And so she kind of took note of that, but she kind of put it in the back of her mind. So again, she's driving through this town. Now she's noticing that this town has transformed into just like farmland. And then she's just out here just in just land. It's just barren out there. And now she's kind of wondering like, are we going the right way? She actually asks the taxi driver, like, hey, did you make a wrong turn? And the taxi driver is like, no, I put in the address that you gave me, and the address and the GPS is telling me to go this way. And so she sits back and she kind of is just, looking at the scenery, looking outside, trying to figure out where the heck she's going. And the taxi ends up turning onto this really narrow road in between this rustic gate that has all these signs to tell people to stay out, don't trespass, and blah, 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 blah. They go into they're driving down this narrow road, and she sees the house that her aunt Edith had left her. And this house is actually a well-known fixture in this town, and it's called the Ashburn House. As soon as she lays eyes on this house, a memory floods back into the forefront of her mind. And this is actually a memory that she's always had. It's like a dream, actually, that she's always had, but she never had anything to connect it to. So she really didn't understand what it meant until just now. So this dream that she's had, she always has this dream where she sees her mom. Her mom is carrying her down some stairs, and she's like in a hurry to get out of this house. Her mom like takes her out of this house. She's running down this driveway, and she kind of places her daughter, kind of tosses her in the back seat, and she hops into the front seat, and the mom like peels away from the house. Now, Adrienne, being the young girl that she was, she looks back and out of the back window of the car, and as she's looking at the back window of the car at the house, she sees this tall, dark figure come standing in the door frame of the house. And she watches this tall figure wearing this really dark black dress standing in the door frame, watching them as they leave. She turns back around. She looks at her mother. Her mother is crying, tears of mascara. And she also notices something else that is kind of off about her mom, other than her crying, these tears of mascara, and them just rushing out of this house. Her mom has like speckles of blood on her neck. And her dream ends. And she doesn't know, she never knew what that meant. And when she pulled up to this house and she saw this house, she realized that this house is the house from that dream that she's had, that memory that she's had. And that dark figure that was standing in the door frame of her memory / dream that she has, she equates to that being her great aunt Edith. So she has a little eerie feeling about this house now that she recognizes this house. But again, her circumstances don't really allow her to not accept this house. So she gets her stuff out, she gets her cat out, and they head on into the house. Now the house is clearly neglected, but it's not bad. Like, it's not like your typical old, rusted, busted, decrepit house that's like deteriorating and has mold and all that stuff. Like, it's old. You could tell that, it hasn't been kept up, but it's still in livable condition. So she goes into the house, and inside the house is actually deceiving from what you see on the outside, because the inside is actually, it looks way better than it does on the outside. And so she walks into the house. It's completely furnished. It's just, the furnishing is, old, antique. And again, you could tell that somebody or nobody has lived here for a really long time, because it's dusty, it's dirty, or whatever. But overall, it's a livable house. So she walks in with her house. She kind of surveys the house. She starts wandering around, looking around, trying to figure out like where things are, kind of trying to get herself accustomed and acclimated to the house, and also to find where she's gonna sleep for that night. And so she ends up finding like this formal living room, and that's where she decides to sleep. So finally, when they kind of got settled into their sleeping quarters, she noticed that her cat was reacting to something. Like, his eyes were big, his hair was standing up, he was hissing, and he was looking out this bay window that was next to the couch that she was sleeping in, or going to sleep on. And so she is looking at him, reacting to something that he sees. She's looking out the window and she doesn't see anything. So she kind of goes up to the window. She really like looks out the window, and she is thrown off about one thing. Like, it is pitch black outside. Not your normal pitch black. Like, it is pitch black. Almost, it's so dark outside to where it almost feel like you can touch the darkness. Like, it's so thick you could barely see anything outside. So she found this strange, and it was eerie to her that she's never seen darkness like this. And so her cat is still hissing and still reacting to something. And so she decides that, well, this is a 3-story house, so I'm going to try to go to the very top of the house to see if I can see down into this thick darkness and figure out what my cat is reacting to. So she leaves her sleeping quarters and she hits the back stairway. And right when she hits the back stairway, she sees like a table with a lantern, oil, and matches or a lighter. And she's confused as to why this is just randomly positioned here, but she's on a mission. So she kind of just, looks at it, thinks it's weird, and she heads up the stairs. She goes up the stairs, and it is, again, pitch black upstairs. So she's like feeling her way around, trying to feel the walls, like all over the walls, trying to find a light switch. And she can't find one. And she's like, okay, now I understand why this lantern and oil and matches were down next to the staircase, because there's no light switch upstairs, which is really weird because there's electricity, like there's light downstairs. So how do you build a house where there's only light downstairs, like electricity downstairs, but not on the second or third floors? That makes no sense. But she is on a mission. So she goes downstairs, she grabs the lighter, she, fixes it up so she can see. And now the lantern is lit, and she goes upstairs, and she's kind of looking, walking slowly, trying to figure out where she's going to go in order to look out another window to see what her cat is reacting to. She looks on the walls and she sees all these family portraits, and they kind of give her an eerie feeling, but again, she's on a mission, so she doesn't really pay too much attention to it. She goes down the hallway, she goes into another room, and as she goes into this other room, she again looks down out the window, and it is pitch. She cannot see a thing. It is pitch black outside. It's crazy how dark it is outside. So not only does Adrienne notice again how thick and dark and black it is outside, she also notices that it is eerily quiet, like complete silence outside, which is very strange because the house kind of butted up against a forest. So you would think that if the house is butted up against a forest, that you would hear, nature sounds. You would hear creatures, insects, just random things moving or whatever, what have you. But it was nothing outside. And so Adrienne, again, is seeing this thick darkness outside, and now she hears complete and utter silence outside. And so this is actually creeping her out a lot. A few seconds after she takes note of the thick darkness and the complete silence that's outside, all the noises of the forest kind of become audible all at once, and it becomes so loud that it becomes deafening to her. It hurts her ears, and so she crouches down, she covers her ears, because the sounds of the forest or the noises of the outside is just deafening. And as she's crouching down with her hands over her ears, the building started to aggressively shake like it was an earthquake. So she having this loud, deafening sounds of outside, and the building is just aggressively shaking, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And so this freaked her out. And so she grabs the lantern, she gets up, and she kind of runs out the room that she was in. When she goes out, she's still shaking, a little shaky from the events that just happened, but she kind of justifies it. Even though her justification didn't make sense, she justifies it as a new home. She didn't know how this house was. It's just settling, and she's just basically tripping. And so she goes downstairs, and as she walks, she's starting to notice that there are like indentations on the wall where there was obviously something there, but she didn't know where it was because, it's not there anymore. And so she looks at these areas, and she noticed that etched into those areas where there was a clear indentation of some type of fixture there, it says no mirrors. And so Adrian like looks around and she's like, okay. And she goes downstairs and she's starting to notice that, randomly around the house where there are clear indications that there was some type of mirror there in its place, etched into the walls. It says no mirrors. And so this was strange, but it wasn't too strange because she seen writing etched into different furniture throughout the house. And she instantly just assumed that her great aunt Eden must have had like dementia or something. And these notes that are etched into the furniture and stuff were just to help remind her. But it didn't make sense. Like, it didn't make sense to her, like, what it was reminding her of. Like, why would you write a note that says no mirrors? That doesn't make sense to her. And it didn't make sense, logically thinking. Like, why would you write that to yourself? Even if you do have a mental illness that is, destroying your memory, why is that something that you need to remember? These notes actually made Adrian go very curious about her great aunt Edith because she barely knew she existed until she received that letter like 3 months ago, letting her know that her great aunt Edith had passed away. And so her curiosity about her great aunt Edith just kind of to like gradually grow throughout the house as she started to wander around, find different things, notice different things. She kind of wanted to know about her great aunt Edith and like what happened to her. So as Adrian settles into the house, sometime later, Adrian receives an unexpected knock on the door. And so she knows that she doesn't know anybody in this area or around this town. And so she is very taken aback as to why anybody is knocking at her door. And so she takes the opportunity, she kind of sneaks up next to the door. Next to the door is like a huge bay window. It's kind of frosted over. So she kind of creeps down underneath the bay window and she peeks through like the corner of the bay window that's kind of doesn't have that much frosted material over it to try to see who is knocking on the door. And she is surprised to see that the individuals knocking at her door are those women that she saw when she first came into town and she felt like were laughing at her. Now, she did not want to answer the door because of that assumption that she got, that feeling that she got that these women were laughing at her when she was first coming into town. But she saw that one of the women had some scones, and Adrian, up until this point, has not had anything or barely anything to eat because she didn't have no money and she hadn't really found a way to go to the store. So at this point, she's kind of hungry. And for that incentive alone, she opens the door. She opens the door, she invites the women in, and it's very awkward exchanges, awkward pleasantries, awkward moments of silence. After the women have these awkward moments, a situation happens that kind of alleviates all the tension between them, and it became more of a relaxed interaction with these women. And so it became so relaxed that Adrian decided to ask these women if they knew her great aunt Edith. The women tell her, yeah, we know your great aunt Edith. Like, everybody knows your great aunt Edith. And she was like, well, what can you tell me about her, basically? And so the women start to give her little information about her great aunt Edith. The first thing that stood out to Adrian about what these women were saying was just kind of how old great aunt Edith was. They presumed that great aunt Edith may have been like 100 years old. I mean, everybody knew her, and it wasn't just their generation. Like, their parents' generations and generations before them knew great aunt Edith. So there was a little curiosity and speculation about her age because it seemed like so many generations of people knew her, and so that was kind of weird. They told her that she always wore this dark black old Victorian dress. She always had her hair up in a bun. She never spoke to anybody ever. The only person that she spoke to were the people at the town's grocery store where she would buy her groceries. And she would walk there every day and she would only buy what she needed for that day and go back to her house. But the thing that really made Aunt Edith and the Ashburn house a fixture and something of note was the Friday light. And Adrian asked, like, what is the Friday light? And so they told her that ever since they can remember and their parents can remember, every Friday, like right when the sun goes down, in the highest window of the house, Edith would light a light. Nobody understood. Nobody knew what that meant, why she lit this light every single Friday, but it just became like a staple, a custom. Everybody knew that when they walked by the Ashburn house on Fridays, once the sun was going down, that they would see this light. And that's actually what kind of notified some of the townspeople that something was wrong, is because there was a Friday where that had passed and the light was not lit. And so some of the townspeople got concerned. They hadn't seen Edith go into town, which she did every single day, and then accompanied with the fact that that light wasn't lit on that Friday or a couple of Fridays. They were like, okay, something's wrong. So some concerned townspeople went over to the Ashburn house. They broke into the house to see if Edith was okay, and they ended up finding her dead in her home. And when hearing that information, Adrian was like, and she was kind of hesitant to ask, but she really wanted to know. And she said, did anybody know like where she died in the house? And the ladies told her like, no, we don't know where she was found in the house. We just know that she died in the house. So that kind of made things a little creepy for her, but it was like, okay. After Edith's death, the Ashburn house became just like this big mystery, because nobody, as long as Edith had lived in this house, had ever stepped foot into the Ashburn house. Barely anybody had stepped foot on her property. And so once she died, it just sparked this curiosity amongst all the townspeople, especially the kids that lived there and knew about the Ashburn house and knew about Edith. It sparked like this excitement, this thrill to finally be able to go onto this property and possibly go into this house. And once people started to do that, that's when the rumors of the hauntings started to spread throughout the town. People were saying that the Ashburn house is haunted, like seriously haunted. And a lot of kids around the town would dare each other to go up to the Ashburn house and try to go into the Ashburn house. A lot of the town's kids would dare each other to try to go into the house or just get on the property. And when they would go onto the property, some would claim that they would see a black figure walking back and forth, slowly back and forth throughout the house, through the different bay windows. Some of them said that they heard sinister laughter and screams coming from the house. Others claim that when they got up to the property and stood in front of the house, that they would feel breathing on the back of their necks. And when they turned around, nobody would be there. But the biggest rumor and the most disturbing thing and the scariest thing about the Ashburn house is the truth behind why Edith chose to live there alone for all those years. The truth about what really happened to Edith's family, and the real reason why Edith burned a candle every Friday night in the highest window of the house, and what she was truly trying to keep out of the house and keep buried. And if you want to find out exactly what all those secrets are and what really happened to Edith's family, then as always, I'm going to highly encourage you to listen or read The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy Coates. And you guys know, if you read the descriptions of my videos, that Darcy Coates is one of my favorite authors. So I'm going to say that. You guys should definitely listen or read her books because they are amazing. Her stories, her trope is haunted houses. Like, that's her thing. She does have other stories that she writes that are, outside the haunted house trope, but that is her niche. Like, that's her thing, haunted houses. But I absolutely enjoy pretty much all her books. There's very small, there's like a very limited amount of books that she has written and published that I have not enjoyed. She is by far one of my favorite authors. I have a couple of them, but so far I've covered a lot of her books on this channel because I really like her books. But anyways, I hope that I was able to provide you a little bit more detail about this amazing story written by one of my favorite authors, in the hopes that it entices you to either go ahead and read the book or listen to the book for yourself and find out the crazy twists and turns that Darcy Coates always takes you on through these haunted house stories. Find out all the secrets and find out all the twists and turns that Darcy Coates takes you on through this story. It is an amazing book. I really enjoyed this book. If you haven't, I will tell you this, that by far my favorite book by Darcy Coates, and I think I said it in the video when I did it, was The Carol Haunt. That is by far my favorite book. I have listened to that book so many times. I think I said that in that video, that I listened to that book so many times. But I've also listened to this story a lot of times too. So I am a true fan of Darcy Coates' writing. I enjoy her writing. But anyways, enough of my rambling. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already, then I highly encourage you guys to like, comment, and subscribe down below. If you guys have any suggestions or book reviews that you would like me to cover on this channel, also leave those below. I will be checking my comments. And if you want to follow me on any of my social media platforms other than YouTube, all my social media handles are listed down below. You can also leave me book suggestions or reviews down there. I will be checking my messages on my other platforms as well. Other than that, you guys, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Peace. Is that peace? Bye.